Chapter 681. Bright Yang, Yin Death. It did not matter whether it was the tribe members for the great tribe of Surging Clouds or the disciples of All Entities clan. At that moment these people, who numbered to nearly 20,000, saw a shocking sight at the same time from two directions. They saw the gigantic statue of the god of berserkers in midair, and at the instant their gazes fell on it, all of them felt their blood boiling with a bang. That statue of the god of berserkers gave immortals pressure, but to the berserkers, it brought them a wave of excitement and madness that could not be described with words. It was as if their full potential would explode forth if they were beside that statue, and their combat abilities would also increase by a large margin compared to before. Aside from the statue causing these berserkers to feel their blood boiling, the tens of thousands of immortals on the land also caused the people from the great tribe of Surging Clouds and All Entities clan to have their pupils shrink. The immortals on the ground also saw the berserkers coming en masse as well. All of them were silent, but they no longer had the arrogance and suppressive air they put on when they met in the past, because there was a terrifying person here who had slaughtered an innumerable amount of their own and even destroyed Di Qian's clones, and they had witnessed the entire process of this happening. The great tribe of Surging Clouds and All Entities clan caused a slight change to happen to the battlefield. However, before the two forces of berserkers could understand what was going on, they saw the gigantic statue of the god of berserkers and the runes rotating and rumbling in the sky. As those runes rotated, powerful light spread out from within them, and it was clear that a new batch of immortals were about to descend. Aside from these, there was also something else that caused the great tribe of Surging Clouds Xianxia and All Entities clan's Xianxia's gazes to gather in the same spot. It was the sight of Su Ming's eldest senior brother fighting against Jian in the sky, with loud, booming sounds echoing around. Eldest senior brother held a battle axe in his hand, and in his other hand was a huge shield that had been formed by the near 100 shaman souls at some point in time. He was engaged in a battle to the death with Jian, and Jian's expression was dark while retreating continuously. He had already executed a large variety of attacks, but none of them could suppress the fierce will that propelled his opponent to press forward courageously. Black fog churned at the spot where these two people fought, and there seemed to be an endless amount of ferocious fiends from the world beyond roaring about. However, none of them seemed to have the courage to get closer to Su Ming's eldest senior brother. Booming sounds continued spreading outwards, and their battlefield took up half of the sky. There was a long arc that was charging towards the person with the crown and the black robe. The face of that person in the long arc could not be seen clearly, he was only a blurry shadow. Almost at the moment these berserkers arrived and saw the battle in the region, a loud boom that shook the sky and earth traveled swiftly in all directions from the spot where there was a person fighting against the black-robed man who looked like an emperor. It doesn't matter whether it's 36 or 37 times, neither does it matter whether these memories are real or fake, none of them matter to me. Su Ming's voice echoed in the air in the midst of the rumbling. He staggered nearly 1,000 feet backwards, and when he stopped, he lifted his head. There was blood trickling down the corners of his mouth. This blood was not due to him being injured by Di Qian. It had instead been caused by Su Ming biting the tip of his tongue to force his mind to clear up in the midst of the chaos that had been brought about by his memories erupting to the front of his mind. It was incredibly difficult to break this seal previously, but when you arrived, some of my memories were automatically released when the seal cracked. Di Qian, this is too fake. It doesn't matter to me whether what you said is true, as long as I kill you. None of this is important anymore. Su Ming's eyes turned crimson, and he swiftly took a step once again towards Di Qian. When he lifted his right hand, the statue of the god of berserkers in the sky let out a roar and lifted its right hand as well before it hurled its fist forward. But it did not throw its punch towards Di Qian, it had instead directed its fist towards Su Ming. It was also at this moment that the people from the great tribe of Surging Clouds and All Entities clan gathered their gazes on Su Ming from two different directions, even if they were still tens of thousands of feet away from the battlefield. They saw Su Ming's face clearly, and also saw the exact same face on the statue of the god of berserkers. At the instant their gazes gathered on Su Ming's body, an impulse rose within them, and that impulse made their blood start erupting out of their control. It was boiling violently in all berserkers now. They did not know who was the first to cry out, but quickly more roars joined in, and the sound of them all instantly rose and fell in the air until there was only one voice left in the sky in the end. Greetings, God of Berserkers. Greetings, God of Berserkers. Greetings, God of Berserkers. That voice shook the sky and earth, born from 20,000 people shouting at the same time. This was the booming sound coming from the blood of 20,000 people. This was the roar of the Berserkers after they traveled several tens of thousands of leagues to this place. Almost at the moment that voice reverberated in the world and shook the entire area, the right fist of the statue crashed into the charging Su Ming. The 10,000-foot-tall statue of the God of Berserkers lifted its head and let out a violent roar, as if it was responding to the Berserkers' roars. In the midst of that roar, Su Ming's body swiftly fused into his statue. At the instant he disappeared, a powerful light that had never appeared in the statue's eyes suddenly began shining. That light was killing intent and intelligence. At the instant it appeared, it was as if the statue of the God of Berserkers became Su Ming himself. Fusing with the statue of the God of Berserkers was a racial divine ability that could only be executed by those who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm. Before they attained this level of power, a strong Berserker in the Berserker Soul Realm could place their statue of the God of Berserkers in their body, but once they attained great completion, they could reverse the process and fuse themselves into their statue. Then, from there, they could bring out the Berserker's powerful might. The black-robed Di Qian's pupils shrank slightly. He let out a cold harumph towards Su Ming's declaration that he did not care whether his words of killing him 36 were true. Di Qian did not bother to continue speaking. Killing intent instead shone briefly in his eyes, and he lifted his right hand swiftly, swinging it at the sky. During that instant, he opened his mouth and spat out a golden stone. This stone was not big. It was only the breadth of a finger and half a finger long. However, once it appeared, the stone abruptly exploded, and the area around its edges began squirming. In the span of a breath, it grew to the size of a fist, and in the next instant it grew as large as a skull. Once that stone appeared, a wave of power that belonged to Bright Yang abruptly spread out, causing the world around it to look as if it was being torn apart. Ripples spread out from around it, as if space itself could not withstand the stone's existence. This was a Bright Yang stone. In fact, it was a Bright Yang stone that was refined by Di Qian. The light it spread out could destroy all souls of Yin Death. You are, in the end, something from Yin Death. This Bright Yang stone will be the item that will bring you your death. Under the radiance of Bright Yang, I'd like to see how you will manage to not be destroyed. The black-robed Di Qian lifted his right hand and seized that stone before he squeezed it. The stone cracked and exploded. When that happened, it looked as if a sun had broken down. Powerful rays of golden light spread out through the area with a bang, but it only spread out to 1,000 feet before gathered together and charging towards Su Ming. It caused the entire area around Su Ming, who had transformed into his statue of the God of Berserkers, to instantly turn gold. Moments later, a large amount of black fog spread out from inside it. The face on Su Ming's statue began to swiftly and violently wither away. This feeling was much stronger than the first time Su Ming had walked out of Yin Death region. Su Ming let out a muffled roar, but he did not retreat. Instead, he took a step towards that golden light. He lifted his right arm, and with his palm facing upward while the back of his hand was turned downwards, he swung them towards the Bright Yang light around him. What scatters away is the past, and what remains is the future, but the moment now is destiny. Su Ming stated, his voice echoing in the air. When he swung his arm, the Bright Yang light that had caused him to feel death instantly fell back and moved away from his body, as if time had started flowing back. At that moment, his statue that was Su Ming's body was no longer enveloped by Bright Yang light. However, this was the divine ability Di Qian's magical body had used specifically to curb Su Ming. Even with Destiny's time reversal, Su Ming could only make that light retreat for an instant. Immediately after, Bright Yang light gathered on Su Ming's body once again. However, in that instant when there was none of it covering him, a large amount of black fog had spread out from Su Ming's body, and he looked as if he had grown endlessly older. His statue lifted its left hand at that moment and seized the Yin Death that filled the sky above the world of Berserkers. Verdant Abyssal Seal. Su Ming let out a roar towards the sky, and as he shouted, 7 green shadows immediately appeared around him. They were Su Ming's 7 Abyssal Yin Death Seal. Bright Yang could curb Yin Death, but if he flipped it over, Yin Death could also curb Bright Yang. Bright Yang light came towards him once again. At the instant it covered Su Ming's body, the the 7 green figures around Su Ming gathered together to kneel and bow towards him. At the instant they bowed down, the vortex in the sky let out a violent roar, and a large amount of black smoke descended swiftly, but it was not aiming to attack anyone. It was instead charging towards Su Ming. Su Ming had placed the verdant abyssal seal on his own body. By doing so, at the instant bright young light was about to reach him, the black fog that was Yin Death came rushing towards him with a loud rumbling. A ceaseless noise that shook the sky and earth erupted. It shook the world so much that the sky changed and the earth looked as if it was about to start tumbling about. When that sound gradually dissipated, Su Ming's statue still remained standing in the sky. He looked old, and an incredibly weakened air spread out from his body, but as killing intent flashed in Su Ming's eyes, he immediately started recovering from his weakened state, because those who had attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm could absorb the power of the world and use it for their own. It was especially so when Su Ming had fused together with his statue of the god of Berserkers. The speed at which he absorbed the power of the world made it seem as if he was devouring it. Bright young light that had been around him was already gone without a trace. The only person remaining before him was Di Qian, who was standing thousands of feet away with an incredibly dark expression. 9 Abyss Sword could not kill you, and neither could bright young light destroy you. Then, I'd like to see how you will handle punishment. Di Qian's lips lifted in a cold sneer, and he raised his right hand and pointed swiftly towards the sky after he formed a seal. Chapter 682, Dying with You. When Di Qian pointed upward, he also bit the tip of his tongue and coughed up a mouthful of golden blood. At the instant this blood appeared, it immediately turned into drops of golden pellets that charged towards the vortex in the sky as he swung his right arm. With mine will, I activate the Immortal's vessel and have it descend to Yin Death Void to execute Destiny's heavenly punishment. Di Qian's voice reverberated in the area at that moment. There was a supreme might in that voice, causing all the people who heard it to feel their hearts tremble. It was especially so since the divine ability Di Qian cast this time was definitely nothing ordinary. This was an art that could only be executed by having him give up a mouthful of his magical body's blood as a price, and it would definitely not be on the same level as what his clones could execute. Ever since Di Qian's magical body appeared, he had not once executed a weak art. It did not matter whether it was his Abyss Sword or this Destiny's punishment, all of them were killing moves. Almost at the moment his blood turned into long arcs and charged towards the vortex that covered the entire Berserker's sky, the vortex froze because of it, as if the rotations within it had stilled. In the boundless galaxy beyond the vortex in the Berserker's sky were 9 cultivation planets that kept vigilance on Yin Death region. When the vortex stopped moving, brilliant light erupted from the galaxy, and as the light grew to a piercing degree, a strong ray swiftly erupted with a bang from one of the cultivation planets and shot straight into that layer of Yin Death fog. This forced the fog to spread out, allowing a little of that strong ray of light to seep through and charge towards the land of Berserkers. But it was not just one. There were 9 of them. 8 other strong rays of light came from the other cultivation planets as well. With a loud whistle in the air, they burst into the galaxy, causing the Yin Death vortex to roar and a thick layer of fog to start spreading outwards madly. Then, a pit appeared in the center of the fog. Anyone in the world of Berserkers who lifted their heads and looked at the sky at that moment would be able to clearly see the center of the vortex in the sky. Once the fog stilled and started tumbling about with those booming sounds while looking as if it was boiling, the fog started dispersing at the edges, and as it scattered away, it revealed a gigantic pit at the center. And for the first time in their lives, the Berserkers saw the true galaxy. Yet the instant the galaxy appeared, it was immediately replaced by 9 powerful rays of light that were piercing to the eyes. They sliced through the sky with loud whistling sounds and shot through Yin Death fog to descend on the land. Their appearance immediately turned them into the most powerful light in the world of Berserkers. The 9 punishments appeared at the same time, and they were all coming to destroy Destiny. In fact, this would not just affect Destiny. The might of these 9 powerful rays of light could destroy the entire Eastern Wastelands. This was the powerful killing move that Di Qian had prepared to destroy Su Ming. You're mad. Jian let out a furious roar as he fought against Su Ming's eldest senior brother in the black fog. In the midst of shock, the immortals on the ground spread out and started fleeing in all directions. Before the 9 powerful rays of light closed in, the land began to feel like a sea of fire, and a wave of heat washed over everyone present. The 2 berserker forces in the sky were stunned, their gazes fixed on the sky. They watched the powerful light coming towards them, because they had nowhere to run. Destiny, I refuse to believe that you will be able to fight back against this punishment. Besides, a ferocious look appeared on the black-robed Di Qian's face. He bit the tip of his tongue once again and coughed up another mouthful of his magical body's blood. That blood charged towards the sky with a loud whistle. At the same time, powerful light spread out from the 9 cultivation planets beyond Yin Death Fog once again, and another 9 rays of powerful light shook the planets, then burst forth with a bang. I'd like to see how you'll fight against this. The black-robed Di Qian let out a low growl. A malicious and cruel look appeared in his eyes as he looked towards Su Ming, who had fused with his statue of the god of berserkers in midair. Forget what sort of price Di Qian would have to pay to activate these 18 powerful rays of punishment. If they descended on eastern wastelands, then it would bring this continent a disaster that was equivalent to the amount of damage that was brought forth when it had rammed itself into South Morning. The immortal's might was shown clearly with this priceless treasure that could deal out a punishment strong enough to destroy the world of berserkers. Perhaps this peerless treasure was the greatest reason for caution and would also bring about the greatest amount of damage to the berserkers. I can spare you, as long as you lower your head before me and fall once again. I can give you one final chance. The black-robed Di Qian stood in midair and looked at Su Ming coldly. At that moment, he had a real upper hand in this battle. Now that the true punishment had appeared, Su Ming would not be the only one who died. The endless amount of berserkers in eastern wastelands would die alongside him. Su Ming looked at the sky. He saw the 9 powerful rays of light charging towards him with loud whistles and also saw the second batch that had appeared right behind them. This was not the first time he saw Di Qian executing this attack, but clearly, what he saw last time could not compare to what he was seeing right then. This was the true punishment. Is everything about to end? Bitterness rose in Su Ming's heart. Even if he attained great completion in the Berserker Soul Realm, in the face of the priceless treasure that could destroy the entire world of berserkers, he was still unable to fight. At that moment, his vow to kill Di Qian seemed to have turned into a massive joke, a spoof, a fact telling him that he could not hope to fulfill his vow. And this was not even the real Di Qian. This was just his magical body. But I don't want to accept this. Madness appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and a crimson-red light shone in them. It was formed by blood capillaries filling his eyes and determination that appeared in the statue's gaze when he fused with it. I refuse to accept this. How can I lower my head to you? Su Ming let out a hoarse roar. It was a voice filled with madness, a cry screaming that he was not bothered by death. I can die, but even if I die, I will remain standing. I will hold my head high as I die. Who are you, Di Qian? You are not worth me lowering my head. My power may not match up to yours, but my backbone is made of madness that not even the universe can bend. As Su Ming roared, he swiftly charged out and lifted his left hand to strike the first powerful ray of light that came from the sky. He was full of an indomitable determination, a shocking will and resolution. It was a madness screaming that he would rather die than lower his head. He hurled his fist forward, and at the instant his hand clashed against the first ray of light, loud booming sounds reverberated in the air, and the left hand of Su Ming's statue exploded with a bang. It turned into shards that fell backwards before turning into powder that scattered in all directions. As violent ripples swiftly spread through the air, Su Ming's laughter reverberated in the air. I lived in an illusion, I was lost, I could not find my home, I did not have a home. But why does it matter? Su Ming lifted his right hand and hurled his fist towards the second ray of light as he charged towards the sky. A roar reverberated in the air once again, shaking the world so much that the weather changed. Su Ming's right arm was ripped into pieces and completely shattered. Why does it matter? Between the threat of death and a spine that would never bend, I will choose the latter. Su Ming's statue of the god of berserkers had lost both its arms, but his body still continued charging forward. With a spin, he lifted his right leg and kicked the third incoming ray of light. It became darker, and the right leg of the statue was completely shattered. This scene even shocked the black-robed Di Qian. The horrifying charge made him feel as if he had just gotten to know Su Ming for the first time ever. Ji An and Xinggan were no longer fighting. The horrifying booms were enough to shock all the people's hearts. The tens of thousands of immortals on the ground were shocked to silence as Su Ming went through the horrifying and devastating blows. During that instant, some among the two berserker forces wept. A loud bang shot into the sky, but it could not cover Su Ming's laughter. He lifted his left leg and kicked forward, making his leg clash against the fourth ray of light. Once it was destroyed and disappeared, Su Ming, who had lost all his limbs, used his body to fight against the fifth ray of light. With each bang, all those who bore witness would fall into a deeper state of silence. At the moment the torso of Su Ming's statue of the god of berserkers shattered and he only had a head left in the sky, the sixth ray of light charged towards him. Su Ming laughed long and hard, then rammed his statue's head against the sixth ray of light. Booming sounds swept through the world. At the instant the statue's head shattered, Su Ming's real body appeared in the sky. He coughed up a mouthful of blood and his body plunged down towards the ground. The seventh, eighth, ninth, and up to the 18th ray of light were all charging towards him. I can still continue. Su Ming gritted his teeth. Without his statue of the god of berserkers, he would immediately disappear into the wind under this light. Right at the instant the final burst of power erupted from Su Ming's body and he was about to force himself to charge towards the seventh ray of light. A tall, headless body appeared right in front of him. "Youngest junior brother, I'll die together with you," a muffled voice said, and tears fell from Su Ming's eyes. He laughed loudly. "Damn it, if I knew about this beforehand, I wouldn't have come here. But since I'm already here, I, Xianxia, from the great tribe of surging clouds, will die together with the god of berserkers." The thin old man from the great tribe of surging clouds let out a sigh at that moment, and his speed increased exponentially as he charged towards Su Ming. "We of the great tribe of surging clouds will die together with the god of berserkers." The near 10,000 members of the great tribe of surging clouds behind the old man did not retreat. All of them roared and charged forward. "I, Xianxia, from all entities clan, hereby greet the god of berserkers, and am willing to die together with the god of berserkers." All entities clan's Xianxia was the first person to have chosen to come and pay his respects to Su Ming. At that moment, there was a slight complicated look on his face, but there was no hesitation within him as he said these words. With one move, he charged towards Su Ming. Right behind him, the members of the 12 tribes that formed All Entities clan roared together and charged forward with loud whistling sounds. "We are willing to die with the god of berserkers." The voices from these 20,000 people shocked all the immortals' hearts at that moment. These voices created a huge wave of emotion in Su Ming's heart. He had never experienced this kind of feeling before. The indescribable warmth that was formed from what he was seeing now spread, for the first time, through his heart. Chapter 683, Elder. A race should have a soul. A race without a soul was bound to die out. The berserker's soul had gradually faded away and died as the first god of berserkers left, as the second god of berserkers was torn apart, and the third god of berserkers disappeared. The only thing left behind was bewilderment and a sickly illusion. The berserkers lived in the glory that existed in ancient scrolls and refused to wake up. Perhaps more accurately speaking, they could not accept the state of decline their race was currently going through. The berserkers were indeed no longer the race that had the worship of all worlds under the first god of berserkers' rule. It was like an old man who had one foot in his grave and was walking down the final stretch of his life. The separation of the continents, the inability to continue their culture, the inner strife caused by the shaman's betrayal, and the permeation brought by the numerous immortals who descended over the years had caused the berserkers to fall apart, leaving behind only an empty shell. Even their level of cultivation was eternally stuck at the berserker soul realm and they could not enter the next realm. As time passed by, this race began to gradually be unable to catch up to their history, and they were slowly abandoned by time. Would such a race still have a soul? No, it no longer possessed one, because it had already died. Its past glory only remained in the moaning notes of a zun. Its past prosperity had also been destroyed and turned into emptiness. It was a skeleton burning in flames, and it was destined to only be a comforting dream. It could let her people's blood burn, but it would be difficult for it to set fire to its people's souls. The immortals' 9 planetary punishment was the guillotine hanging over the necks of the people in this world. Perhaps this guillotine should have fallen a long time ago, but no matter what, this was the land of berserkers that had been worshipped by worlds in the past, and a person who had made all immortals bow their heads to him and made sacred morning Dao world tremble before him had been born in this world. Xianxia. This was his hometown, and even though he had gone missing a long time ago, he might perhaps not be dead. Perhaps he would come back one of these days. Even if he did not return, he had left behind priceless treasures in the world of berserkers to protect his people, and had also left behind the berserkers' law, which was much stronger than all his various priceless treasures. This law was also Yin Death Region's law. Under this law, all those who descended to the world would find their power weakened without bounds. If it was not for this law, then the berserkers might have disappeared in time a long time ago. However, these were all just external forces. If a race was void of a soul, then it was still walking only towards extinction. What is a soul? Su Ming had no knowledge about it, but the roars echoing in his ears and the warmth as well as the powerful emotion he felt in his heart allowed him to understand something. Perhaps these roars, these declarations to die together, and the state of their blood being set on fire had allowed a shred of the berserker's soul to bloom. They were afraid of death, but they quelled their terror and faced death bravely without turning back. If the people's soul had already disappeared, if the race itself had already been cast aside by time, then, if he could not make his people rise once more, he would die with his race. The declarations of dying with the god of berserkers might not have even been aimed at Su Ming, but toward all the berserkers. They would die with the berserkers. The roars from these 20,000 people, their shouts that shook the sky and earth turned into the strongest howls in the world at that moment. Madness could be heard in their voices, and it was an outburst that was born after being oppressed for an innumerable amount of years. Under this outburst, why should death even matter to them? Under this outburst and under this will to rather die with the berserkers, the emotion Su Ming felt in his heart made a warmth bloom in his body. It was one that he had never experienced before, and it had nothing to do with any sort of love. This was the shoots of the newly born berserker's soul. This soul was no longer the berserker's soul of the past. It was a soul born from the unwillingness to accept fate even in the midst of destruction, a madness born from being empty, and a determination to die in glory rather than live in dishonor. This soul had no form. It could not be seen, could not be touched, but during that instant, the tens of thousands of immortals on the ground could strongly sense a will from the 20,000 people in the sky that seemed as if they could rise from ashes and crush everything. Jian's face turned pale. He took a few staggering steps backwards. At the level of cultivation he could see the hints of what was going on with just a glance. As he watched the 20,000 berserkers roar and saw their wills erupting with loud booms, his expression changed rapidly. The berserker's soul. The black-robed Di Qian's expression changed immediately. He had also not expected that the 9 planetary punishment he executed would cause these 20,000 berserkers to show signs of forming a soul. This sign was a form of belief and a worship. It was also a form of determination. Once this sort of resolution appeared within a race, then it would become incredibly terrifying in the future. It was a racial soul that no form of power could destroy. Unless all the descendants of that race were killed off, and none remained. These 20,000 people are seeds. If they don't die in this disaster, once they spread out, they will spread the seeds of this berserker's soul throughout the entire world of berserkers, and they will affect all those with berserker blood. At that time, the berserkers will be like a race that opened its eyes, having woken up after sleeping for tens of thousands of years. I absolutely cannot let this happen. These people must all die. A glint appeared in Di Qian's eyes, and he bit the tip of his tongue to cough up another mouthful of blood before he lifted his right hand and swung it at the air. The golden drops of blood charged towards the vortex in the sky, and as it rumbled, piercing light erupted once more from the 9 cultivation planets that kept watch over Yin Death region beyond Yin Death fog, and another 9 powerful rays of light descended with loud booming sounds. Yet at the moment these 9 rays of light shot through Yin Death fog and were just about to charge into the world of berserkers, a moaning note of a zun suddenly rang through the world of berserkers, coming from Yin Death fog in the vortex. The notes of that zun began ringing incredibly abruptly, and they sounded like the weeping of the berserkers. The notes of that song reverberated in the air, and it caused the 9 powerful rays of light to freeze at the instant they descended. At that instant, the entire universe and the world that was within Yin Death region looked as if they had stopped moving. The second batch of light also stopped moving, and so did the 7th ray of punishment, which was located right above Su Ming and which Xingan as well as a large number of berserkers wanted to block. Everything seemed to have instantly come to a halt. The only thing that existed was the moaning song of the zun. It echoed in the world, and at the instant the notes from the song fell into Su Ming's ears, he lifted his head slowly and looked towards the sky. He was familiar with this song. He had heard it several times before, and the last time he heard it was before his battle against Di Qian's clone. The previous time before the last was when he was looking at an old man, and he had played this song before Su Ming. The old man's face appeared in Su Ming's head, but suddenly, he found that he could not remember how the old man looked. His breathing quickened, and to his shock, he noticed a fact that he had never realized before. The old man's face seemed to be different every single time Su Ming saw him. The only thing that remained clear in Su Ming's face was his actions, which looked like those of a blind man. It was blatantly obvious that this old man had a different appearance every single time Su Ming ran into him, but only at this moment did Su Ming notice it. This was an incredibly strange matter, and it allowed him to understand a lot of things. A soul has finally appeared among us berserkers. How can I just let you destroy it? An ancient voice that seemed to have lived through an endless amount of time came from the fog in the vortex. Once it started speaking, the moaning notes of the zun started echoing in the air even more animatedly. The black-robed Di Qian's pupils shrank swiftly. This was the first time he had heard this voice, but it was not the first time he sensed the presence that now came from the vortex. It was this presence that had made him not dare to send his magical body to the land for years. It was also this presence that had given him that faint sense of danger. Who are you? Di Qian took a step forward. When he lifted his right hand, his fingers shattered and turned into 5 blood arrows that charged into Yin Death Vortex. These 5 blood arrows immediately turned into 5 blood dragons that fused together as they roared ferociously, transforming into a 5-headed beast of blood that charged into the vortex. A booming sound surged into the sky. In the midst of that noise, Yin Death Vortex looked as if it had crumbled and started spreading outwards swiftly. At the instant it spread out, a person in white was revealed within. That person was an old man with dull eyes. His face was different in everyone's eyes, and in fact, his face would also change every single time anyone looking at him blinked. However, there were very few who noticed this. It was as if their minds had automatically ignored the fact that his face was constantly changing. At the instant Su Ming saw the old man, he recognized him. This was the old Zun maker. However, this time, once he saw the old man's face clearly, he found his heart trembling violently. The amount of shock he felt was something he had never experienced before. Even when he learned that the world of berserkers was really Yin Death world, the amount of shock he felt could not hope to compare to what he was feeling now. He felt as if there were thousands of lightning bolts crackling in his head, and all of them were roaring at the same time. His mind instantly turned chaotic and his body shuddered violently. He was stunned, unable to think, and the only thing remaining before his eyes was the old man's face. He did not dare blink. He was afraid that if he blinked, the old man's face would change once again, and the face that was making him tremble would go away. That face was the one that had left the deepest mark in his memories. That smile was the most difficult thing for him to forget in his life. All of these things caused Su Ming's soul to become empty, clear of all confusion. Elder. Su Ming mumbled, and right after he mumbled these words, he let out a shocking cry. Elder. The old man's face before Su Ming's eyes at that moment was the one that belonged to Dark Mountain Tribe's elder. He was Mo Sang, Su Ming's elder. Chapter 684. 1 point. Humans would usually describe time passing as something that happened in the blink of an eye. They would usually say something akin to many years have passed by in the blink of an eye. This was a metaphor, because time was short, resulting in most people finding that it was already too late by the time they wanted to treasure it. This was an expression of regret after time passed. It was a thought that would appear after something had happened, and they would find themselves reminiscing over the time they had not cherished. But for Su Ming, it was the opposite. He did not dare blink, because he knew that if he blinked even once, he would no longer be able to see the same face. One blink, and time would pass. The reluctance to part before the eventual parting made Su Ming feel tears well up in his eyes as he stared at the affectionate smile and familiar wrinkles in the sky. "You suffered," the old man said in a hoarse voice. Su Ming trembled, but he could not say even a single word. "You're Mo Sang." "No, you're not Mo Sang." The black-robed Di Qian stared at the old man in the sky and uttered these two conflicting sentences. Almost at the moment he finished speaking, a glint appeared in his eyes. He swiftly lifted his right hand. His previously destroyed fingers had recovered, and Di Qian seized the air in the direction towards the sky. "I understand now, but you're just a yin death soul. Even if you've mastered the power of yin death and became an undying and imperishable existence, you can only do so here." The black-robed Di Qian's words were a little jerky and difficult to understand. Once they were voiced and he lifted his right hand, a ball of fire started burning the black-robed Di Qian's body. He was burning his magical body. The act of the black-robed Di Qian burning his magical body was telling enough that he was incredibly wary of the old man who had walked out of yin death fog. He almost instantly let out a low roar that reverberated through the area. "I won't be able to kill you here, but I can seal you. Immortals planets, send yin death downwards." As Di Qian seized the air, a string of complicated and difficult incantations tumbled out of his mouth. At the same time, the flames burning his body became even stronger, and his legs disappeared straight away. As they vanished, a boom immediately surged into the sky from the vortex. Muffled, it traveled through the air. Then, for out of the 9 cultivation planets in the Immortals galaxy that keep watch over the world of berserkers beyond the vortex changed their trajectory. A powerful white light erupted from the 4 gigantic cultivation planets. Once they changed their trajectory, they swiftly charged towards Yin Death Vortex. This was Di Qian assimilating with the power from the cultivation planets by burning his magical body. With the descent of the cultivation planets, the power needed to suppress the old Zun Maker erupted forward. With a loud rumble, one of the 4 cultivation planets sank its body sink into Yin Death Fog. All those who were watching could clearly see that it was sinking rapidly. Within an instant, it disappeared without a trace, just like a gigantic stone that had sank into the depths of a river. The other 3 cultivation plants sank into the fog one after another, right behind that first planet as loud banging sounds rang in the galaxy. At the same time, all those within the land of berserkers lifted their heads and looked upwards. The fog in the sky was churning so violently that it had already surpassed the level of activity it had when the powerful rays of light shot through earlier. At that moment, the fog in the sky was roaring like a raging sea. At the instant that happened, a gigantic cultivation planet appeared within the fog in the sky. The fog started spreading madly in all directions. The cultivation planet that was so big it would be difficult to describe its size with words replaced the whole sky. A curved edge appeared, and all those in the world of berserkers could see the mountains and seas on it, as well as the shocking pressure that was coming from it. That was a planet descending into the world of berserkers. No matter where any person was, as long as they were in the land of berserkers, they would be able to see the cultivation planet that had revealed a small arc of itself in the sky. Eastern wastelands trembled. The Dead Sea roared. The entire land of berserkers started showing signs of collapse as this cultivation planet descended. During that instant, booming sounds that reverberated through the entire world of berserkers traveled into the air, and right before everyone's eyes, there appeared other arching edges that belonged to 3 other cultivation planets. There were 4 cultivation planets in total, and they had completely occupied the sky, shocking everyone who saw them. If these 4 cultivation planets exploded at that moment, then the entire world of berserkers would no longer exist. The Dead Sea would completely dry up, and Yin Death region might even end up turning into a gigantic pit. I'd like to see you stopping me from killing the person I want to kill and destroying the soul I want evaporated. There was only a small portion of Di Qian's body that remained as he continued burning it. He laughed madly and lifted his arms to swing at the 4 cultivation planets that were now occupying most of the berserker's sky. The 4 cultivation planets that had revealed their edges let out rumbling sounds and sank down, but no matter how fast they were, since they were too big, they looked as if they were sinking down slowly. It was the same no matter from where on the land of the berserkers a person watched them. As they descended and the circumferential area grew larger, eastern wastelands showed signs of collapse. At that moment, a sigh echoed in the area. The person who let out this sigh was the old Sun Maker. At that instant, his body grew endlessly larger before everyone's eyes, and in the blink of an eye, he turned into a gigantic figure that could hold up the world. That body was a mere illusion, and everything within him was made up of thick yin-death aura. It was as if his existence was formed by it alone. Once he supported the sky, his gigantic body changed once again with a bang. He turned into a piece of cloth that had no bounds. The blue cloth was the color of the sky. As it tumbled about, it covered the entire berserker's sky and charged towards the 4 cultivation planets, enveloping them within. Su Ming had never blinked, not even once, and he still did not blink when the old man turned into the cloth that was the sky and covered everything, also blocking Su Ming's gaze. Due to this, he was no longer able to see that familiar face. It was also at that moment that the black-robed Di Qian turned to look at Su Ming. He only had a head remaining after even his arms disappeared as his body burned. Su Ming, no one will be able to save you anymore. I've prepared a divine ability specifically for you. You'll like it a lot. You'll like it really much. And I will end this farce with this art. At the instant a cold sneer appeared at the corners of Di Qian's lips, a powerful dark light erupted from his eyes. That dark light spread out instantly. It covered the entire blue sky that was formed by the old Sun Maker's body, causing the whole sky to turn dark. But it was not complete darkness. There were sparkling stars in the sky, and each of these stars were like Di Qian's eyes. At the same time a chilling light shone from those stars, they seemed to connect to form a gigantic face. Su Ming's heart trembled violently. He felt as if every single person around him had disappeared. It did not matter whether they were berserkers or immortals, only Su Ming himself remained in the entire world under the sky. He stood there and looked at the human face formed by the stars. At the instant he saw it, a loud bang rang out in Su Ming's mind. How could he possibly forget this sky? How could he possibly forget this ancient face that was formed by the stars? Su Ming, remember this sky. The final divine ability his elder had cast all those years ago in Dark Mountain seemed to be echoing in Su Ming's ears. It was a divine ability that made a flag cover the entire sky. It was the same sky, the same face, just like how it was in his memories. That face was incredibly similar to Su Ming's, but it was a lot older than his. However, there was no gentleness in its eyes. There was only an overbearing look, as well as a murderous, bloodthirsty glare. He looked at Su Ming, and Su Ming was also looking at him. Do you want to return to Dark Mountain? The face in the sky gradually opened his mouth and let out a voice that sounded like thunder booming. It echoed in the air and fell into Su Ming's ears, shaking his soul. Do you want to see your elder? Do you want to fulfill your promise to Bai Ling? Do you want to see Dark Mountain sky once again? The voice grew louder with each question. Eventually it became part of the world, causing perplexity to appear in Su Ming's soul as it trembled. Do you want to return to the past? Do you want to restart from the beginning? When that voice asked this question, a powerful ray of starlight erupted from the sky. It spread out and covered the land, causing the world to turn muddled before it started repeating itself in a loop. 1,000 years of reincarnations. 1,000 years of destiny. 1,000 years. The voice and its overbearing pressure gradually weakened. Eventually, it became so faint that it was barely noticeable. Su Ming slowly closed his eyes. A deep wave of fatigue turned into a whirlpool within his soul that drowned his consciousness and submerged everything about him. A loud boom that shook the sky and earth surged up towards Su Ming's ears, and he instinctively opened his eyes. The fatigue that was spreading through all of his body made him unable to help himself, and he closed his eyes at the instant he reopened them. However, right at the moment he opened his eyes, he saw a piece of blue sky. He saw that the now incomplete Dark Mountain only had 4 summits, and Black Flame Mountain no longer had any summit. He also saw Black Mountain Tribe's elder, who should have been dragged into the void. There was also the familiar figure of his elder, who was originally standing on the mountain before he fell down in the midst of his exhaustion. This is the past, Su Ming mumbled. This was the final scene he saw before he closed his eyes once again. This time, after he closed his eyes, Su Ming felt that he had a very long dream. In his dream, he saw himself going to a place called South Morning. Over there, he came to a place named Ninth Summit, which he called his home. He had 3 senior brothers and a strange master who liked to change his clothes often. He also went to Eastern Wastelands and became the god of berserkers. When Su Ming opened his eyes, he woke up from this dream and found himself lying on a small bed. Everything around him was incredibly unfamiliar. "You're awake." A familiar voice reached Su Ming's ears. It came from a pale-looking teenager, who was Bai Ling. Chapter 685, 60 Years. So, it was all just a dream. However, the world in his dream had been so real. South Morning's 9th summit had been so warm. The concern shown by his senior brother Hu Zi, his second senior brother, and his eldest senior brother would fill his whole entire body with warmth when he recalled it, and he would miss it dearly, in a manner which he could not describe. So, those were all just part of the dream. He had not been swept into the void above Dark Mountain. His elder had not disappeared. He had never gone to South Morning, and neither did he have a master called Xianxia. So, it was really just a dream. He had not entered Freezing Sky Clan, and neither had he gone to the world of 9 Yin. He did not meet with any shamans either, much less witness the catastrophe of the Eastern Wastelands. Neither did he form all that amount of enmity towards that man called Di Qian. He did not attain great completion in the Berserker soul realm in the end as well, and he did not become the god of berserkers. This dream lasted so long. Su Ming mumbled as he leaned against a dried-up tree in the region Windstream tribe had given to Dark Mountain tribe. He sat there and looked into the distance. The wind from the horizon sounded as if it was moaning, and as it blew on his body, it made him instinctively feel a little cold. In my dream, I saw all those familiar faces. Bei Ling, Chen Xin, Wu La, and the others. I saw the immortals, shamans, berserkers, the old Zunmaker, and Yin Death region. Su Ming sighed softly. Was it really just a dream? He lifted his head and looked at the flying snow in the sky. A dazed look appeared in his eyes. Right behind Su Ming was a tribe that was no longer whole. His tribe members who had migrated from Dark Mountain had lost their families and their home. They could only be affiliated to Wind Stream tribe within the tribe's area. The elder was gravely injured, and he was still in a state of unconsciousness. Lei Chen left. Su Ming had no idea where he went. Perhaps he would return someday. Perhaps. Wu La died. Nan Song died. Many of his tribe members had already turned into corpses. Waves of sorrow filled the entire tribe, and they were so heavy that it made Su Ming's breathing freeze a little. Shan Hen had also died. He died in Su Ming's hands, and Su Ming lowered his head and looked at his own hands, staying silent. The little girl called Tong Tong was curled in a corner of the tribe behind him. She was hugging a broken doll, and tears were falling down her cheeks. Su Ming, we're about to start. In the midst of his silence, a deep voice reached him from his side. That voice belonged to Bei Ling, and he was walking towards Su Ming with a pale face, stopping under the tree Su Ming was sitting on. Su Ming looked at Bei Ling. In his dream, he saw that this person was an immortal, and he belonged to Great Leaf Immortal Sect. He was Di Qian's disciple, but that was just a dream, was it not? Su Ming shook his head and jumped down from the tree. A funeral service to make offerings to the deceased in Dark Mountain tribe was held in the tribe in the midst of the tribe members' grief and silent cries. The burning flames danced about in a strange, distorted fashion. Arranged neatly within those flames were the corpses of all those from Dark Mountain tribe. Those were all the remains they had managed to retrieve of their deceased. Most of these corpses were incomplete. There were few that were whole. The flames licked the bodies. In the midst of the coldest blizzard during winter, All Dark Mountain tribe members silently knelt on the ground. They looked at the flickering light from the burning flames and listened to the cracking sounds traveling through the air. All the silent cries of the tribe members turned into a depressing air, causing the area around them to become even colder. Su Ming saw Wu La and many familiar faces within those flames, and a number of those that were less so. The funeral service ended during the third midnight. Su Ming stood in his tribe and looked at the snow in the sky, then at the ground that was no longer dark due to the illumination of the snow. He saw a girl's figure standing there, as if she was waiting for him in silence. It was Bai Ling. The blizzard was strong, so strong that it seemed to have broken the world into fragments, and these pieces could no longer gather together to become one. In that snow, Su Ming walked towards Bai Ling and stood with her. They remained in silence. Neither of them spoke. Bai Ling, who was dressed in white mink fur and who had snow on her dark black locks, was an incredibly breathtaking sight with her beautiful face in this snow. However, the concern and sadness in her eyes caused her to look at Su Ming with a dazed expression, and slowly, tears fell from her eyes. I'm about to leave. I'm going to a place far away. My parents have sent a message to have someone pick me up. Bai Ling bit her bottom lip and looked at Su Ming. Come with me, she whispered softly. Anguish filled Su Ming's heart. He had lost a lot of his tribe members, and too many other things had slipped from his hands. He could not leave, but it was even more difficult for him to make Bai Ling stay. He did not know what right he had to make her stay, preventing her from seeing her parents. Have a safe trip. Su Ming remained silent for a long time before he whispered in anguish. Almost at the instant he finished saying those words, Bai Ling walked up to him and hugged him gently. Then, a pair of icy cold lips and that face which Su Ming could never forget occupied his entire world. Her lips were very cold, but there was a hint of warmth amid their chill. The anguish in the girl's tears had also fused together with that warmth to turn into this kiss of farewell. Our promise still remains. It won't end in 7 days, nor will it end in 7 years. It will last for an eternity. Su Ming, I will wait for you. I will always, always wait for you. Bai Ling turned around and ran into the distance. Su Ming could not see where her tears fell in the snow, but there was one drop that seemed to have fallen on his cheek. It was as cold as the snow, and Su Ming could not tell whether it was really her tear or just snow. He stood in the snow and continued standing there until he saw 2 vague shadows of tall figures appearing beside Bai Ling, and as if they were protecting her, they took her into the distance. Su Ming could not describe how he felt in his heart. He remained silent for a long, long time. Half a month after Bai Ling left, his elder regained consciousness. The elder mentioned nothing about the fight against Black Mountain Tribe's elder, and neither did Su Ming talk about it with anyone. As time passed by, the death of Black Mountain Tribe's elder gradually turned into something of the past. Su Ming could sense that his personality had changed. He was no longer lively and had gotten used to silence. The cheerful sounds in the tribe in the past had also disappeared. The sorrow brought by the loss of their loved ones had caused all of them to choose to become silent. He started training day and night, began creating medicinal pills without stop so that his level of cultivation would increase. However, he would often still open his eyes as he meditated in the dark, and he would remember that dream. In the blink of an eye, 10 years passed by. 10 years could change many things. As the children grew up and time passed, the sorrow of 10 years ago became incredibly faint. However, the people would still remember the devastating tragedy that occurred at that time every Memorial Day. Dark Mountain Tribe had turned into an affiliated tribe of Windstream Tribe, because their elder had already lost his power and become an old man who had 1 foot in his grave. During these 10 years, Su Ming stayed beside his elder, until the winter of the 10th year. That was a cold night. Freezing wind moaned in the air and blew against their tent, causing the lamp within the tent to flicker. His elder lay inside. At that moment, he was already incredibly old. He was looking at Su Ming, at the young man who had grown up before his eyes. I cannot continue staying by your side. La Su, don't be sad. This day was bound to come. Remember the things I told you in the past. Remember. Berserker's Realm Mountain. You must find Berserker's Realm Mountain. You have to find it. I don't know precisely where this mountain is either. I only know that it is in your heart. Look for this mountain. You will be able to find all that you desire there." These were the elder's final words to Su Ming before he breathed his last. The elder passed away. On the third day, the flames of the elder's life were extinguished, and Su Ming entered the awakening realm, becoming the second to do so in the tribe. The first was Bei Ling. The existence of two berserkers in the awakening realm caused Dark Mountain Tribe to have an incredibly high position among all the affiliated tribes in Windstream Tribe, and it also allowed Dark Mountain Tribe to migrate back to their home. Even Windstream Tribe would not prevent this migration, because the current Dark Mountain Tribe had already obtained this right. This was a trip back to their home after a long separation of 10 years. At the instant the entire Dark Mountain Tribe returned to the ruins of their home, many of the elderly folk wept and knelt down on the ground. Their cries echoed in the air. Dark Mountain was no longer as it was. There were only 4 mountains left, and after 10 years, this tribe under Dark Mountain began rebuilding itself, and its past form gradually reasserted itself. This was their home. It was Dark Mountain Tribe's home, and it was their people's soul. Time passed by quietly as the 4 seasons went by one after another. Bei Ling and Chen Xin's wedding was held during autumn under Dark Mountain. That wedding was incredibly grand, because one of the people in the couple was the tribe leader of Dark Mountain Tribe, and the other was the daughter of their previous tribe leader. At the moment Bei Ling reached Awakening Realm, he was elected as Dark Mountain Tribe's tribe leader. This wedding that was hosted after their people returned to their home was filled with joyful laughter, and many became drunk in this happiness. Su Ming stood in the distance in silence and looked at his people dancing around the bonfire at night. Joyful songs reached his ears. He saw the happy smile on Chen Xin's face and also saw the tall and firm stature that would give the handsome Bei Ling the might that belonged to a tribe leader. Su Ming silently drank his wine. He remembered Bei Ling. It had been 17 years since Bei Ling left. Su Ming could still remember the cold kiss she had given him 17 years ago, before she left. He could also remember that promise. He could still remember the long dream that he had when he woke up 17 years ago, but it only appeared in his head occasionally now. On this night, Su Ming became drunk. The 17 years of silence and his personality that made him a man of few words caused him to possess an incredibly awe-inspiring bearing within Dark Mountain Tribe. It was especially so after he became Dark Mountain Tribe's elder. That imposing air around him made all his tribe members not dare speak too much before him. With a hint of tipsiness and a pot of wine in his hand, Su Ming looked at Bei Ling and Chen Xin before he turned around and walked back to his house. He started training, and right outside his house was a fire ape that was now a little old. It was Xiao Hong. The passing of time and the people's separation from their loved ones due to death caused the leaves in the autumn to draw out growth rings like those from trees as they floated down. With each circle, another year went by. Another 30 years passed.